So accommodations are individualized per student, and there is no cookie cutter list of accommodations. There are drop downs, but you can write them to be tailored any which way. So another thing I was going to say is for things like fire drills, anything where there's accessibility, like you mentioned the wheelchair, obviously it all has to be ADA compliant. So that shouldn't even be a thing that's written into the IEP, like that's the law. So if they have fire drills and there's students that have to be able to access, definitely the accessibility piece should already be embedded throughout the campus. Obviously, having a plan in place as far as who's going to be there to help this student if they can't mobilize their wheelchair on their own, for example. But I mean, obviously, if they can't do it on their own throughout the day, then somebody should be there already anyway. So that should be a service written into the IEP as it is. But like your example of the acronym, I mean, that could be written in as an accommodation. So making sure that those are things that are practiced with the student. So it's that repetition, and then they learn until they can like repeat it back. And then if you do an in vivo, and you can even have goals to support these things. You can have an IEP goal where, you know, the student will expressively, you know, report back like what an acronym means and reenact how to carry out that acronym. To me, that's actually a really good IEP goal. So whatever you just said, run, freeze, whatever, like that could be a goal where you say those 3 letters, the student repeats it back, and then you say, okay, show me. And that would be a really great way for them to practice, because in the moment, there's going to be no time to think, right? So you need to get it to be like muscle memory for them. Again, like social stories for that specific thing, it could be written and worded that way within the accommodation section. If there are certain very, very specific tailored pieces that require more language, you can always attach a page to the accommodation section. You can label it whatever you want. You can call it like an active shooter, you know, an active shooter plan as opposed to an emergency plan. And it can be really clearly mapped out as far as for this student, all of these things need to be in place, or all of these things need to happen if it has to be that, you know, super individualized. And of course, that can be attached to the IEP and written into their file. And I also think if it's that important, there should be a condensed version of it that's always available for like a substitute, because if it happens to occur when there's a substitute in the class, they're not going to be familiar with that student's full IEP. They will not have read every student in the class's IEP and file. So that needs to be like front and center for that sub, so they know if this happens, this is what he needs, like no questions about it. So I would definitely recommend that too. And that can be the accommodation, is like condensed active shooter page for substitute. Make sure that's in the IEP as an accommodation, and then it's attached to the IEP so everybody knows what that is.